More Democrats side with far right as anti-trans attacks continue. Boo. This article is by Liberation News. It starts off, just 3 weeks into 2024, the Trans Legislation Tracker website is already tracking 308 active bills, including 38 bills at the national level. That attempt to deprive transgender Americans of the few legal protections they have and to introduce a slew of new restrictions targeting their most basic rights, including the right to access necessary and life-saving health care, to have their identities legally recognized, to practice their culture, to engage in sport, and even to access public spaces like bathrooms. In 2023, a stunning 503 anti-LGBTQ bills were introduced across the United States, and 75 were able to become law. In addition, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered what is expected to be only its first blow against the meager national level legal protections LGBTQ people have when it ruled that discrimination is legal if it can be given a religious veneer. Clearly, the far right has no intention of relenting in its all-out drive to divide the working class by demonizing LGBTQ people, and trans people especially. The new bills build upon previous successes, expanding attacks that had previously only targeted trans children, such as a denial of access to medical transition care to include adults, as well as trans activists have long warned it would happen. Please go on to Liberation News and read the article in its entirety for yourself. I am, for time, going to skip over this section on Ohio. It is important, though. Please do read. Missouri and Florida escalate attacks. Other states dominated by the Republican Party have also expanded their anti-LGBTQ attacks. In Missouri, where all trans supportive care for minors was banned last year, and a ban for adults was only narrowly averted due to statewide protests, 21 anti-LGBTQ bills were pre-filed. 9 were heard on the very first day of the legislative session, widening the attacks even further. In Florida, with the most harshly anti-LGBTQ laws of any state, lawmakers have proposed a slew of hateful new laws, including requiring affidavits stating one sex assignment at birth for every Floridian who wants to get a state ID, an end to all legal recognition of trans people in the state, and even a bill that would make an allegation that the plaintiff has discriminated against another person or group because of their race, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity constitutes defamation. As with the recent attacks on the free speech rights of Palestine solidarity activists, an oppressed group would be essentially banned from naming their oppression. Critics of Israel and Zionism have been labeled anti-Semites. Likewise, if it passes, SB 1780 would make one liable for defamation lawsuits for criticizing anti-LGBTQ policies as discriminatory. In West Virginia, Senate Bill 194 would ban all transition care for not just minors, but adults under the age of 21. It would also require all social workers, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and therapists in the state to attempt to cure trans people of their transness. The language of curing transgender people, like that of curing gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, is nothing more than an attempt to erase a subsection of humanity that has existed as long as humans have existed. You cannot cure queer people because of our queerness is not a sickness. You can only intimidate people into denying and hiding their true selves, a goal that serves the capitalist system by upholding the patriarchal rules that also oppress women. Democrats side with far right against the people. While Democrats have postured that the last line of defense for LGBTQ people against the far right's assault in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, several Democrats sided with GOP lawmakers to pass two anti-LGBTQ rights bills earlier this month. One would allow schools to segregate LGBTQ people, and the other would restrict access to transition-related health care for trans youth. This betrayal echoes a maneuver by Maryland Democrats in 2022 who killed their own trans health care bill over fears they wouldn't be able to override a veto by the Republican governor who had not even expressed opposition to the bill. The bill was finally passed the following year. At the national level, Democrats have been scarcely better champions of LGBTQ rights. Biden pledged to pass the Equality Act, which would ban discrimination against LGBTQ people across wide swaths of U.S. public life, in his first 100 days in office. Tick-tock. 3 years later, it has yet to come to a vote in the Senate. Meanwhile, last year, Biden's own educational department made anti-trans changes to Title IX, which mandates gender equality in sports programs. LGBTQ people denounce these changes as a roadmap for bigots to discriminate against them. The Democrats, which cast themselves as the champions for many minorities, including LGBTQ people, are continuing to prove that they will not even be fair-weather friends to queer people as the far-right attacks get worse, and increasingly see us as a political liability. This is in spite of opinion polls showing for years that anti-LGBTQ laws are deeply unpopular in the U.S. society, with 64% of respondents to a March 2023 poll, including 55% of Republicans, saying there is too much legislation aimed at limiting the rights of transgender and gay people in America. Another poll last September found that 70% of respondents said politicians are not qualified to write laws about trans people's medical care, and another showed that 65% of Americans oppose the Supreme Court's position that religious-based discrimination should be legal. Instead, the data shows that over the last year, roughly half of Americans are listing material concerns like unemployment, high living cost, inflation, and poverty, or the poor national leadership as their most important concerns, while less than 0.5% said that LGBTQ rights were their most important problem. Only an independent political movement tied only to the working class, not to the bought and paid for politicians of the capitalist ruling class, is capable of defending the rights of working and oppressed people. It has been our fight back that has forced them to implement any kind of reform at all. And it has been working people leading the defense against the far right's latest attacks as well. On Wednesday, January 24th, the PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, and other supporters of trans rights will hold a speak out at the Ohio State House in Columbus against Governor DeWine's attacks and will raise the call for unity and resistance wherever such attacks arise. However, such reforms can only take us so far. If we want to really cement the complete equality of LGBTQ people and all other rights under attack, we must reconstruct this society on a socialist basis, putting exploited and oppressed people in charge who will defend the needs of the many, not the rich few.